The most connected fighter in UFC history isn't Jon Jones. It isn't Anderson Silva. It's a man who's been fighting since 2008 and has said he wants to be the first person to ever reach 50 UFC fights. And the only way this is known is because I spent the last few days building this thing. Before we get into things further, I just have a shout out for this video idea. A channel called Racemate did exactly this for Formula 1, where he mapped every driver who ever started a race in one giant web. I watched it, thought it would be such a sick idea for the UFC, and I had to know what it looked like for MMA. This is every fighter who has ever stepped into the Octagon. 2,712 of them. Each data point is a fighter. Each line connecting each data point is if they have shared the Octagon together. Hidden in this graph, there's a chain of 14 fighters that stretches from a debut in 2024 all the way back to a man who fought once in 1997. There's a fighter who shared the cage with 19 different champions and challengers, more than anyone alive, along with so many stories across the UFC's history. Left to right is time, 1993 to today. Top to bottom in the graph is how much a fighter actually achieved, and getting that right across 33 years and a dozen different eras was the hard part. I know I have the ELO stuff, but I wanted to try something different, so the rankings are as follows. First, by number of title fights, which actually leads to a funny visual already, where there's a pretty clear line if that fighter has ever been in a title fight. And if they're tied on number of title bouts, and a lot of them are tied at 0, I break it with UFC win rate, then UFC finish rate, then total UFC bouts. Again, this is not a perfect ranking. Of course, no ranking is. I know because I see your guys' comments about the ELO stuff. But champions float to the top, one and done journeymen sink to the bottom, and the rest in between are just kind of a mix, really. Now the colors of the graph. Red simply means you have the most connections. Purple means you're stranded on the edge, only having one connection. So red to purple is how many connections you have. And the reddest dot in the entire graph, the single most connected fighter in UFC history. If you know ball, may not be hard to guess, but if you didn't, 44 different opponents. Obviously, he does have the most fights in the UFC at 47 as well, but of course, either way, more than anyone who has ever fought in the UFC. And what's crazy is Jim Miller has never once fought for a title. His career is honestly remarkable though. Debuting in 2008, and he's still going, chasing that 50th fight, fighting through injuries and a battle with Lyme disease that probably would have ended most careers years ago. And despite all that, he's honestly been in the cage with pretty much like everyone. So of course you have people like Jim Miller and Andrei Arlovsky who are at the center of a lot. Then of course there's the other extreme, down at the bottom, 419 fighters. Over 15% of everyone who's ever fought in the UFC have exactly one connection. They showed up, they fought, they disappeared. I find it funny just, how they all sink to the bottom. It makes sense, but it's just kind of funny how that is, looks visually. And I feel like I should point this out now. There's something you guys may have seen at the beginning of the video, that there's 2 separate clusters. I essentially separated the men's and women's divisions into 2 separate clusters. The men's division forms one giant galaxy of 2,393 fighters, and the women's division forms a separate galaxy of 262 fighters. Something covered in the Racemate video that I found super interesting was the idea of 6 degrees of separation. You've probably heard of 6 degrees of separation. Every person on Earth is an average of 6 connections away. I wanted to know if this holds in the UFC. So as a part of this project, I built a chain finder. Type in 2 fighters and it gives you the shortest path of who fought whom between them. Under the hood, this is just a shortest path search. It's the same thing that your GPS does, except the roads are fights and the intersections, the data points, are fighters. Let's try something silly. Royce Gracie, the man who won the very first UFC event in 1993 with an open weight class. And the other end, Justin Gaethje, who just beat Ilia Topuria at UFC Freedom 250, 33 years apart. How many fighters are in between? 5 fighters. Royce Gracie fought Ken Shamrock. Ken Shamrock fought Tito Ortiz. Tito Ortiz fought Patrick Cote. Patrick Cote fought Donald Cerrone. And Cerrone fought Gaethje. That's it. 5 fights connect the man who started the whole thing to a current champion right now. Running the numbers on average, any 2 connected fighters in the men's web are about 5.5 pops apart. To focus on this idea of the chains more, something we can take a look at then is, what is the longest chain? The two fighters that are the furthest apart in this entire web. And there could be an assumption that it run diagonally, some random guy from the 90s to some modern star on the other end in 2026. With, of course, the intuition that the further in time should mean the furthest apart in connections. And well, it is, kinda. Igor Severino, who debuted in 2024, and Houston Dorr, whose only UFC appearance was back in 1997. 14 hops lay in between them, the two most distant fighters in the network. Igor Severino sits out on the very edge of the web, having one fight in 2024. Houston Dorr had one fight in 1997 where he lose by TKO. The chain goes as follows. Houston Dorr fought Dwayne Kaysen fought Mark Kerr fought Moti Horenstein fought Mark Coleman fought Dan Severin fought Royce Gracie fought Matt Hughes fought Sean Shirk fought Frankie Edgar fought Chris Gutierrez fought Cody Durden fought Jafel Filo fought Daniel Perez fought Andre Lima, and Andre Lima fought Igor Severino. Of course, there are so many different stories and people that are scattered throughout this chart, but here are some of the random ones I find the most interesting. When I was scrolling on Anderson Silva's most connected fighters, I noticed a weird overlap between two data points. Those two data points are Yushin Okami and Thales Leites. My fault if I'm butchering that. I just thought these two were very interesting as both their careers lasted from 2006 to 2018, both had 21 UFC bouts, both had one title fight chance, roughly about the same win rate and finish rate, but they never actually fought. That's just kind of funny to me. Two guys who on the graph seem to be in the same spot, but just never fought. There are several overlapping patterns like this, especially a lot for the new fighters, but I just find this one in particular to be the most interesting. I guess if we do want to look at some famous names, Silva shared the cage with 19 champions and challengers, 19 people who had fought for a belt at some point, given of course his own 13 title fights. But this is more than any fighter in UFC history. In the graph, his edges reach into every era of middleweight and light heavyweight worlds, and just several different eras in general. So of course there is the women's web as well. I don't think there's really too much to really analyze within the women's web. The average number of steps is actually 3.5, and the longest chain is only 8. The longest chain would be from Feng Jiokhan to Alice Pereira. That chain follows as Feng Jiokhan fought Shi Ming fought Bruna Brazil fought Denise Gomez fought Eduarda Mora fought Veronica Hardy fought Jamie Lynn Horth fought Haley Cohen, and Haley Cohen fought Alice Pereira. This cluster on the far right is probably one of my favorite to click around in. Hover around here and you get fighters like Shavkat Ramanov, Mazvar Evolov, Makayev, Ian Gary, Bo Nickel, Michael Morales, Lerone Murphy, basically every hot prospect from the last few years bunched into the same corner. And they all clumped for a couple of reasons. One, they're all recent fighters, so they're kind of shoved into the right side of the timeline. They're green and yellow because they've only fought like 5 to 11 guys so far. But the funny part is, obviously how high they sit. Obviously they sit below the title fight threshold because none of them have had their title fight yet, but they're still up there in the top 20% of the graph. 2,712 fighters, 33 years, 8,546 shared bouts. Every one of them chose to walk into the cage with another person on the same graph. Again, this graph doesn't rank them. I just thought it would be a cool visualization of every person and when they fought each other. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.